Now, what are these oncological emergencies? They are arise from the metabolic and endocrine disturbances that result from the malignancy or are secondary to therapy. So basically, these are the metabolic and endocrine disturbances. What are the other oncological emergencies? They are space-occupying lesions that can press on the or obstruct the vital organs and cause mechanical or surgical emergencies. And third but not the least is the pancytopenia, which can present as an oncological emergency. Secondly, to bone marrow replacement or chemotherapy, what I've been treating, let's say in case of a leukemia, and then the secondary to pancytopenia, there were so many cases, they come with infections or hemorrhage, and they can be oncological emergencies. So they may result in hemorrhage, anemia, susceptible to the overwhelming infections. So basically, these are the three subsets of the oncological emergencies. As I said, I have divided this topic in order to make it interesting into 7 cases, and which are the cases you can come across or we came across. And I thought I'll share with you those cases. So this was a 4-year-old baby male child who came to us with fever, progressive pallor for the last about 10 days. Now, petechial spots were noticed in the body over for the last about 7 days. And now for the last 1 day, this child had been having fast breathing. When the child came to us, this child had pallor, this child had petechiae, tachypnea, and lymphadenopathy. It was generalized lymphadenopathy with hepatosplenomegaly. And when we looked in for the bone tenderness, there was sternal bone tenderness which was noticed in this child. So the case is clinically very clear that you have hepatosplenomegaly, fever for about 7-10 days, generalized lymphadenopathy. A possibility of course, acute leukemia was kept in mind. The child was investigated, and investigations revealed a hemoglobin of 6.2 with a TLC of 1.1 lakh. So the TLC was much raised with thrombocytopenia with a platelet count of only 43,000. So when we did the peripheral smear examination, the peripheral smear examination had revealed us the 13% blasts and the rest all were okay. So basically, the RBC series was normocytic, normoclomic, but then the 13% blasts were seen. The biochemistry was done, and the biochemistry revealed this child had serum calcium was a little low, that was 8.2. Serum phosphorus was very high. Sodium, potassium was okay, potassium was very high. So it was basically hyperkalemia, hypocalcemia, and hyperphosphatemia. Uric acid also was raised, so it was hyperuricemia. So basically, you have 4 things which are there. I'll discuss with you what are these. And then following though the peripheral smear had shown us the 13% blast, we still carried out the bone marrow, which we have to find out do the CD marking or the flow cytometry. One thing importantly here, I can tell you that flow cytometry even can be done from the peripheral blood if the peripheral blast count is more than 20%. But then for the further following or for the further monitoring of this child, when the child is put on chemotherapy, you have to do the bone marrow examination. So I am showing you a slide of a bone marrow, and you can see these are all the lymphoblasts which are being seen. I'm trying to focus it here. So these are all lymphoblasts. So basically, they are just like RBCs. You have a higher nuclear cytoplasmic ratio, and the size of the is just like a 7 to 10 micrometers. So basically, they are size of an RBC, but they are the lymphocytes. So they are immature cells. So this was a case of a lymphoblastic leukemia. So it has been proven by your examination, but then the biochemically, what this child is suffering from. Now this child is suffering from the final diagnosis, which I'm trying to tell you, is the acute lymphoblastic leukemia, but then this child had a higher count of 1.1 lakh per cubic millimeter. That means this child, if the TLC is more than 1 lakh, we always call it as hyperleukocytosis. So this child had hyperleukocytosis, and because the tumor lysis, you see, hyperleukocytosis and tumor lysis syndrome in children go hand in hand. Now, whenever you have a higher count, then when the cell get lysed, either of this because of their own or because of chemotherapy, what happens is there is a triad or rather four things which occur, and that is what is called as tumor lysis syndrome. And tumor lysis syndrome, the pathognomonic of tumor lysis syndrome are you have hyperphosphatemia, hypocalcemia, which was noticed in this child. You have hyperuricemia and hypocalcemia. So all four things were seen in this child. So this is a case of, so final diagnosis will be a acute lymphoblastic leukemia with hyperleukocytosis with tumor lysis syndrome, right? So this is an oncological emergency because now I'll tell you the management. Though this slide is old, but I must tell you that here I have given the guidelines for the management of the tumor lysis syndrome or hyperleukocytosis. Now here I have written alkalinization. Now I must tell you that alkalinization is no more done nowadays. Earlier we used to do that, we used to add soda bicarb 50 to 100 milli equivalents of soda bicarb per liter of the fluid. But nowadays, there is a controversy. So, even though the slide, it is there in the slide, I must tell you that nowadays only the hydration is done. So, hydration is 2 to 4 times the maintenance fluid. So, if supposing the child is a 10 kg child, the maintenance fluid of this child will be about 1000 cc. But then you have to give 2 to 4 times the maintenance of the fluid because of hyperleukocytosis, there is hyperviscosity. So there is evidence of hyperviscosity. There could be evidence of thrombosis. So in those cases, you try to maintain a higher level of the fluid. So you give 2 to 4 times the maintenance of the fluids. But then, as I said again, I reiterate that you don't do nowadays the alkalinization. Now you can ask me why. Because now it has been noticed that even after alkalinization, there is precipitation of the uric acid crystals in the kidney. So there is a controversy. So we don't try to do that. But yes, what are the other further management of hyperleukocytosis and tumor lysis syndrome? You try to you do the diuresis to maintain the urine output, and you can use furosemide or mannitol in the following doses which I have mentioned. And then uric acid reduction has to be done by two methods because as I told you in this child also, the uric acid levels were 8.9 milligram percent. So there will be hyperuricemia because whenever they cell lysis, the uric acid come into the circulation. And when the uric acid comes into circulation, the age-old drug is the allopurinol. And the dose of allopurinol is either you can use at 300 milligram per meter square per day or 10 milligram per kg per day orally. Or what you can do is it can be even given IV, and IV dose is 200 milligram per meter square per day. Yes, if the levels are very high, nowadays we have got the new drug, which is a recombinant urate oxidase, which excretes the uric acid, and that is Rasburicase. So Rasburicase can be used in the dose of 0.2 milligram per kg per day IV. So it is very fast acting drug, and if the levels are very high, then even at times we have been using Rasburicase to excrete the uric acid from the kidney. Now what happens is, like in this child, the TLC was 1.1 lakh. So what happens, as I said, sometimes what happens when the counts are very high, they can cause the hyperviscosity. So sometimes if the facilities exist, then you may have to go for the leukapheresis or the exchange transfusion can be used if the initial white count is greater than 1 lakh. So this is what I have mentioned. That depends on the facilities available in the center. Now what happens is transfusion of the platelets to keep the platelet count over 20,000 is very important. And one thing you must importantly keep in mind is that, as I said, the counts are very high. There is evidence of hyperviscosity can be there. So avoid using packed cells. Even if there is, you have to keep the hemoglobin less than 10 gram per deciliter. So don't try to be very over enthusiastic that the hemoglobin is low and you try to give the blood to these children. So if you should be avoiding packed cells because it will increase the viscosity and that can cause further thrombosis. So as I mentioned here, maintain the hemoglobin less than 10 gram per deciliter. So this is very important. Following that, then when you start the chemotherapy, you have to stabilize the patient. by giving these drugs, and the uric acid and hypocalcemia, all these biochemical parameters should be stabilized. And then you start when the patient is stabilized, you have the adequate urinary output. Then you may start with the chemotherapy, depending on the what protocol you are following. So basically, that's what you need to start. Yes, there is sometimes an indication of dialysis, which I mentioned. That is, it is supposing there is a progressive renal failure. If potassium is going very high, that is more than 6 milligallons per liter, then or there is a oliguria, anuria, or the volume overload is there, which is unresponsive to the above measure. That is, we have given the diuretics, but the overload is still there. Then sometimes, not very commonly, but then sometimes we may have to resort to dialysis. Then monitor these patients, monitor the levels of the calcium, phosphate, uric acid, urea, creatinine, and the complete blood counts every 6 hours. Urine output has to be maintained. You have to keep the hemodynamic of the child should be stable, and then only you start with the patients on the anti-chemotherapeutic drugs. So that is what I have put in the table. And again, I reiterate, nowadays we don't use alkalinization, urinary alkalinization. Okay, now first case I have already dealt with. Now I'll tell you what are the other oncological emergency. My first slide was, either you have the metabolic or endocrinal problems, then the other thing is the oncological emergencies, which are due to the anatomic regions. Supposing there is a growth in the thorax, and that growth most likely because in NHL, or because of Hodgkin's, or because of the other tumors which I'm going to discuss about, there is a compression of the superior vena cava. So that's called as superior vena cava syndrome. And then whenever there is a lymph nodes are much more increased, then what happens is the superior mediastinal syndrome, it compresses on the mediastinum, it can compress on the trachea, and then that is called superior mediastinal syndrome, which consists of the tracheal compression. So basically in children, the superior vena cava syndrome and superior mediastinal syndrome, they usually occur together because of the increase, because the growth, the space is less, it will also compresses the mediastinum and it causes mediastinal syndrome. And on the top of it, you have the superior vena cava syndrome. Now, what happens in these patients is basically there will be suffusion, the eyes will be red, there will be facial edema, and the visible veins will be palpable. Then the child may have respiratory distress, and when the child come to us, there will be corneal congestion. And now, what are the etiology? In these cases, the intrinsic cause are the vascular thrombosis following introduction of a catheter. Extrinsic causes are the, as I said, there are malignant interior mediastinal tumors. It could be Hodgkin's lymphoma, younger child, it could be non-Hodgkin lymphoma, it could be even a germ cell tumor or a thyroid cancer, thymoma as well. So more commonly, what I have seen over my career is that non-Hodgkin lymphoma, Hodgkin lymphoma, and even germ cell tumors can present to us with the superior vena cava syndrome. So with superior vena cava compression syndrome. So basically, this is how I have told you that how the child will clinically present.